Rob Collins from Tsogo Sun, a very warm welcome to the Red Zone. I think it was 14 months ago that the group embarked on a big, perhaps relaunch of the brand is the best way to put it. What was the broad thinking behind it?
I think the important thing is to understand what had happened within the group. We didn't wake up one morning and say, let's do a rebrand, or we've got a colour change to make.
Good idea, here, let's do something. There was a little bit more strategic than that. Yeah.
And I think for several years we had been consolidating and growing as a group, and just prior to that we had merged with the Gold Reef Resorts Group. And with that in mind, which was a big merger, it was 7 or 8 casinos on their part, 10 hotels coming together with Tsogo Sun. They were a listed vehicle, we were Pty Limited. So suddenly there was a complete change of business. And with that we thought, well, we're going to have to recalibrate how we did business, the way we do business into the future. And once we had decided that we were going to be listed, by default it was a reverse takeover, we then had to get everything else aligned accordingly. And I think as a consequence of the business engine room changing, we had to then address, well, what is the brand? What are we going to be listed as? How do we want to present ourselves into the future? So it was really a consequence of a lot of other business imperatives which brought about the brand overall.
So you make the decision to do it, but I'm assuming that in a process like this, you've got to seek consensus, you've got to seek sometimes compromise in a process like this as well with all the stakeholders. That conversation must be a difficult one to have.
And it was.
Yeah.
You got the nostalgic group who wanted to hang on to the 50 years of the Sunburst and the Southern Sun brand. You had the people who were obviously on the Gold Reef side of the fence. They were trying to hold on to what they had. Why do we have to do a name change anyhow? Then there was Tsogo. The meaning of Tsogo is a new arising, a new awakening. And it was the BE side of the Tsogo Sun gaming division. So there were different parties pulling in different directions. There was a lot of common sense which was debated, a lot of emotion. People were saying, well, if we're going to internationally travel, surely the word Southern Suns would roll off the tongue a whole lot easier than Tsogo. You know, is it Tsogo, is it Tsogo? But
it's to your market in Finland or something.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then we looked at brands all around the world, and the reality is there's a lot of brands out of Japan and frankly America which don't exactly roll off the tongue, and sometimes the more quirky they are, the better they are. So I suppose in a way we compromised, but not to create mediocrity. We compromised to say, well, let's hold on to our history. Let's hold that symbol of ours, the sunburst, which is so sacrosanct and so important to the group and the history of the group. Let's bring in the new awakening, Tsogo. And then should it have just been Sunburst Tsogo? Should it have been Sunburst Tsogo Sun? Sun, we've always had the ongoing debate. It's a well-used brand in the country. You can't own the brand Sun, and yet Southern Sun was such an integral part of, in the good old days, you know, Braaivleis Rugby, Sunny Skies and Chevrolet. So we decided to hold on to all of it, but we were really also looking for that logo, which in this case with the Sunburst, if I can draw an analogy like the apple for Apple or the swoosh for Nike, we wanted to have an identity and a logo, but with the brand as well. So I think we got the best of both worlds in hindsight, but there was a lot of debate at the time.
For any big, entrenched, iconic brand doing something like this, Rob, there have to have been mistakes that you made. There have to have been massive obstacles. I think you've outlined 1 or 2 of them that you encountered. What were they? Perhaps more importantly, though, how difficult from a business perspective were they to overcome?
I think I've got to say up front that we anticipated this to be a big problem. There was huge risk. We thought there were going to be clients, suppliers, people who wouldn't buy into it. So we had perceived risks. But the reality is that we ultimately didn't encounter that many obstacles, and in all my experience in the marketing space, etc., this is probably one of the most smooth exercises ever undertaken. We had ultimately, once we had debated vigorously, we had buy-in from the executives to the staff to senior management, the shareholders, etc. We did encounter some problems, as you've suggested here. It would be impossible not to.
Sure.
But they were things that we never really anticipated. Like when you go and have the prominence that we do have in terms of skylines in Cape Town and Durban and the airport and Sandton, you take that as a wonderful positive attribute because you've now got these natural billboards where you can push your new brand and they're just naturally there. But it's when you have to change those signs and little things like having to buy an enormous amount of perspex. Suddenly you realize, and you didn't at the outset think that there would be a problem in terms of supply of perspex. So a lot of our suppliers we had to lean on, get them to import, get them to accelerate. There were certain commodities and products which weren't available for us to achieve what we went out to achieve.
As the marketing head here, what was the one big lesson that you learnt that you could share with other marketing and brand people in this respect?
I think it is one of those with absolute fear and trepidation we entered into it. And having gone through the process, just stay true to one's convictions and belief. And if you ultimately, in terms of the structure and the way you've aligned it to the group, we didn't change this, as I said earlier, for the sake of changing. And the fact that we aligned it to all those other fundamental business disciplines, I think what we've come out with in terms of ticking the boxes and achieving what we want to do as a business, utilizing the content that we're so rich in, and the ability to take all the many brands that we've got within the group and be able to go out with one brand, one voice, and scale, get that massing effect. I think just stay true to your beliefs and see it through. In this case, ultimately, we achieved what we wanted to, and it was a huge success.
I'm assuming you're not going to tell me what this cost, but what you can tell me is how important budget was and adhering to budget in a process like this, because this could have overrun, I'm sure.
Any big brand overhaul can be an expensive exercise. Fortunately, as I mentioned, we weren't just changing color or changing brand for the sake of it. It's a difficult one cost. I mean, just the changing of the neon signs in these big buildings, etc., was at around 14 odd million. So that was a direct hit. A lot of our other, we try to do it as cost effectively, and I think we achieved that as possible. We took a decision that the high impact changes that we had to make were going to be costs that we took a hit on immediately. And then other collateral and things like that, stationery in the hotels and the entertainment destinations, we phased that out over a period of time. We weren't too hung up about that. So in all, we had a TVC, above the line campaign, which we would have gone with anyhow, but this gave us an opportunity to go out with one big brand and representing the whole group. So I suppose if we spent in the region of around 25 odd million rand in total, but that included an above-the-line television campaign, etc., that was the total cost, which I think we achieved an enormous amount, and we got a lot of bang for our buck. But a lot of that would have been incurred anyhow with every brand we went with. And arguably, I must tell you, that now that we weren't promoting Southern Suns, Monte Casino, or the Teatro or show coming here, and they all had different brands, we've actually got big savings now, because when we do go with one TV campaign, for instance, the reality is we're going with one, we don't have to go with three, and we get that massing effect. So we incurred a bit of cost up front. We were quite, I suppose, efficient in what we did, but we've now got, I think, some good savings moving forward.
And that's where we are going to leave it. Rob Collins, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Jeremy.